Before we dive into this story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Now, let's get into it. My name is Rachel, I'm 34 years old, and whenever people ask me how everything unraveled so quickly, I tell them it started the moment I realized my husband, Mark, couldn't give me more than routine. I had become his assistant at home rather than his partner, and somewhere along the way, we stopped being equals. Mark and I had been together for 8 years, married for 6, with 3 beautiful kids who are my entire world. On the surface, our marriage looked steady, stable jobs, a decent house, family photos on the wall. Mark worked in operations, dependable but predictable, the kind of man who thought bringing me coffee in the morning was enough to count as romance. I worked in client accounts, nothing glamorous, but it kept us comfortable. When I was offered a month-long project overseas, I accepted without hesitation. I told myself it was for my career, but deep down, I craved the escape. I wanted to breathe again, to remember what it felt like to be Rachel and not just Mom or Mark's wife. My supervisor on that project was Daniel, a confident man in his early 40s who wore tailored suits and carried himself like he owned every room he walked into. He'd been my boss for 2 years, and I'd always admired his presence, but this trip changed everything. The first week was pure business meetings, presentations, endless hours crammed into conference rooms, but I noticed how Daniel would save me a seat beside him, how he praised my ideas in front of clients. Meanwhile, at night, Mark would call to share stories about his uneventful day, asking me to remind him about school events or car maintenance. I listened, but my mind drifted toward Daniel, who never once made me feel like his secretary. During the second week, Daniel suggested dinner after a particularly grueling client meeting. I said yes because another night of room service alone sounded depressing. The restaurant was nothing extravagant, but he ordered wine and asked me questions that no one had asked me in years. He wanted to know what excited me about my work, where I saw myself in 5 years, what I truly wanted from life. I found myself confessing things I'd buried, how invisible I felt at home, how my days were filled with supporting everyone else's story while mine remained unwritten. Daniel opened up about his own failing marriage, describing it as more of a financial partnership than a relationship. His words mirrored my own reality, with Mark roommates raising kids and paying bills, but little else binding us together. When Daniel walked me back to my hotel, there was a quiet moment at the elevator where he touched my hand. The spark jolted through me like I hadn't felt since college. I should have said goodnight, but instead I invited him upstairs for a drink. We talked until 3 in the morning, and when he finally leaned in and kissed me meditatively, almost as if asking permission, I kissed him back without thinking. My knees went weak, and for the first time in years, I felt alive. After that night, everything shifted. Daniel would show up in the mornings with coffee and pastries, acting professional. But beneath it all, there was an energy that made every interaction electric. A brush of his hand, a glance across the table, that was intoxicating. By the third week, our dinners were no longer disguised as professional. We'd talk about childhood dreams, hidden fears, the versions of ourselves we had sacrificed for responsibility. He made me feel seen in ways Mark never did. One night, after too much wine and too much laughter, I took his hand and led him to my room. That night changed everything. Daniel was attentive, patient, and he made me feel desired in a way I had forgotten was possible. From then on, every night became ours. I explored parts of myself with him that I had always suppressed, things Mark had asked for over the years that I'd dismissed. With Daniel, it all felt natural, liberating. I stopped feeling guilty about Mark's nightly phone calls. Instead, I resented them. I resented the way he droned on about errands and school schedules, while I was living a secret life filled with passion and possibility. The lies flowed easily. I told him I was at dinners with colleagues or stuck in late meetings while I was tangled in Daniel's arms. When the project ended and reality came crashing back, I boarded the plane with Daniel sitting just a few rows away, neither of us daring to acknowledge each other. Mark and the kids were waiting for me at baggage claim, all smiles and hugs, but I felt like an imposter, watching someone else's life. Back home, I tried to slip into the role of perfect wife and mother, cooking elaborate dinners and organizing family activities, but everything had changed. I couldn't unfeel what Daniel had awakened in me. When Mark tried to initiate intimacy, I pulled away. Being with him after Daniel felt wrong, like I was betraying myself rather than him. The affair didn't end when the trip did. Daniel and I found ways to keep seeing each other: lunches, long phone calls, stolen hours in a small apartment he rented under the guise of work. I became reckless. My lies got sloppy. My absences harder to explain. Mark never questioned me, and that made me resent him even more. Eventually, the guilt and the lies became too heavy. One night, I confessed everything to Mark about Daniel, about the affair, about how I had been living a double life. I expected shouting, maybe even rage. Instead, he went cold, methodical. He demanded a full timeline of events, paternity tests for our children, and complete honesty if I wanted even a chance at saving the marriage. Writing that timeline broke me. Seeing every betrayal on paper stripped away the illusions I'd built. Mark made me tell Daniel's wife, Elena, everything. Sitting across from her, explaining how I had destroyed her family while she had been trying to save it, was one of the most humiliating moments of my life. Her fury wasn't just at MIT, was at Daniel, and watching her unleash it made me see him differently too. The fallout was brutal. Daniel's marriage collapsed. His career imploded after HR got involved. Apparently, I wasn't his first inappropriate relationship at work. Meanwhile, Mark filed for divorce. He moved out quickly, documenting everything for court. His lawyer painted me as selfish and reckless, and the evidence was undeniable. He won primary custody of our kids. I became the weekend parent, the visitor in my own children's lives. Months later, I ran into Daniel at the grocery store. He looked drained, older, beaten down. The spark I once chased was gone. Standing there among the cereal boxes, I realized that what I had mistaken for deep love was nothing more than two people running from their own unhappiness. Mark, on the other hand, was thriving. He was healthier, more confident, and happier than I'd ever seen him. He reconnected with friends, invested in himself, and eventually found someone new. A woman who seemed to bring out the best in him, the way I never could. And me, I sit in my small apartment, seeing my children every other weekend, haunted by the choices I made. I destroyed my marriage, my family, and my sense of self for a temporary escape that turned to dust. The real tragedy, ISNT just losing Marquette's, realizing that if I had poured half the effort into fixing my marriage that I poured into my affair, I might have been the woman, standing next to him now smiling in those photos. Instead, I am left with nothing but the knowledge that I was the one who burned it all down.